I'm going to defend sponsored conversations, which seems to be a very controversial subject these days. Perhaps I should explain a little bit, for those of you who don't know about BlogHer, what BlogHer is, so you can see why we are so invested in sponsored conversations. BlogHer is a community for women bloggers and their readers, but we began as a community. We did not begin as an ad network. That came later when the community clamored for relationships with sponsors. They wanted to work with sponsors. They wanted to do it in a clean and well-lighted way. And I think it's an important distinction to make. So today, we were founded in 2005, but today, in 2009, we have about 2,500 of our 40,000 plus bloggers that are in our community who have specifically opted in to working with brands in a number of ways, whether it's through advertising, whether it's through sponsored conversations, in a number of ways. So we really needed to button this up. It was critical to our business, but it was also critical to maintaining our community. So let me start with my defense of sponsored conversations. So here's why people tend to criticize, if they do, why they criticize sponsored conversations. These are the bad apples, the things you see written up in Ad Age that don't work. Deceptive origins. For those of you, let me just see, show of hands, who here is on Twitter just checking brands for whatever reason? So you may have been on Twitter and you see, hey, free giveaway, and you just have to wonder, who's paying this blogger? And then half the time it's a brand pretending to be a blogger. Or likewise, you go to a blog and it's a blogger who's doing a giveaway for some reason for some product. You wonder why are they motivated? There's no disclosure. They're just there happily giving away product and saying good things about product. It's not to be trusted. Clearly, without any demarcation, you can see why sponsored conversations, which that actually is not, but it often gets lumped into, tends to be criticized. Paid mentions. This is pretty common. Pay-per-post is less and less what we use to call these paid mentions, but very often a blogger is paid to at least insert a brand. This is not common with certain networks. It is not existent in ours, but this is something that does happen, and that also creates some confusion around sponsors and sponsored conversations. Paid endorsements. Bloggers love to review products. Sometimes they don't tell you that they were given the stereo system that they now love and write about. This is a reason why a lot of bloggers tend to be criticized when they write about products and they don't disclose. Some of them really do love the product, but you wouldn't know because there is this sense of suspicion right off the bat, because so many bloggers do take free product and do not disclose. And finally, when you see a discussion, it's let's talk about feminine hygiene, all of a sudden on some mommy blog, you wonder what is going on here. It's not authentic. You know that there's something there. It smells, I won't go there. Something's not right about it. You know that these people are not doing this authentically, but they're not disclosing. So this is another situation that happens quite a bit and that gives sponsored conversations a bad rap. So those are the bad apples. Let's talk now about what we've done, because we clearly had a tiger by the tail, but we knew very early on that we needed to establish some boundaries, because at this point, there were bloggers that wanted to work with brands just as much as brands wanted to work with bloggers. So let me just tell you a little bit more about how BlogHer works around this. So we built our editorial standards in 2006. This was before we worked with brands. This was when we built a community of bloggers and knew that there were going to be bloggers on there that were going to be hawking their wares as well as talking about things that we're discussing on BlogHer.com. So immediately we had an editorial standard that we set up saying, by the way, you cannot do this in a conversation. And we did actually indelicately kick them out if they didn't. They were warned, and then if they continued to use this sacred space for their own business, they were no longer invited to participate at BlogHer. So that later on, when we took on advertising, we just applied the same guidelines. So every one of the bloggers that are in our network, they sign guidelines. And we do have community managers that check from every day, actually, to make sure that they're still following along and placing the ads where they should be, that their context is in there. And I'm going to show you what that means in a minute. We do not find that bloggers that do not believe in disclosure are criminals. We think that bloggers can do whatever they want on their space, but we as a publisher have the option of working with them. That's our stance. And finally, we expect us as a publisher, as well as the advertisers that we work with, to insist on these standards. We will not work with advertisers that do not insist on disclosure. Very often bloggers are new, some of them don't know. We try to educate them, but not every blogger knows that there are standards. So if a brand takes advantage of that, we don't work with those brands. And that's how we get by on that. We understand that there are many different standards out there, but we have our own standard. So to define the best practice that we abide by, I'd say that two words, context and disclosure. And I'll show you what that means. So disclosure, this is an example of a typical review blog. This is a blogger who has been compensated for a review. Just so you know, BlogHer does compensate bloggers for their reviews because we think that their time is worth something. But if they do write something, and this falls in line with sponsored conversations or sponsored content, we ask them to post their review on a separate blog called a review blog, or on their blog, but unmarked by ads. It is in an area that is clearly marked, and you can see on the upper left-hand corner, she actually describes this is where I review product. And this is how she works on her disclosure. She has to place the badge in a very prominent spot. She has to say the first line of her post, this is a paid review for BlogHer. She does disclose in her post when she has been given product. And a question that I'm often asked is, so if you are forcing bloggers to have to do this on another site or on a page that is not part of their main center editorial well, do people go there? This particular blogger had dozens of comments from her readers because she was able to promote the fact that she'd reviewed this product on her main blog. She just couldn't have the review there. Also, BlogHer has ways, such as through widgets and through media, that we promote these reviews. But this is the cleanest way that we know, because blog readers, when they're looking at blog content, expect to see in the center well content, not paid content. So context, this is an example of our own on BlogHer. The most popular area of our website is our sponsored offers area, even more popular than the content. And this is an explicit area where we say, guess what, this is giveaway, this is all about sponsors. And bloggers participate sometimes in sponsored conversations where we ask them to give opinions on things, and there really is no issue with that. But there are some critical things. Obviously, we mark this area in a special place. We do not run it in the editorial well. Sorry, I'm clicking. And we do something called Nofollow Tags. It's critical to know what this is. This is an emerging practice. As some of you may know, Google does penalize pay-per-post blogs, sites, or sites that are basically taking money for recommending products and tagging those accordingly so they show up in a high ranking in the search engines. Now, I still don't know how Google does this, but I'm not really going to argue with Google. What we have done is we tag the pages, any sponsored content pages, and we enforce this with the bloggers as well. They must tag these pages nofollow so that Google knows to discount those pages from their ranks. Now again, this begs the question, well then how do you find it? It's really not an issue. In fact, with one of our, I'll just show you a current one that we did with Fage yogurt. Who thought that so many bloggers loved Fage yogurt? We asked them to share stories about Fage. And this was a no-follow page. We got hundreds, about 600 bloggers that provided personal stories of passion about Fage yogurt. The fact is, if it's something that you do well and you promote it properly, you'll still get bloggers there. And bloggers can blog about it afterwards.